There you are. Thank you. Welcome, Sarah. Okay, Roshi, take it away.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's nice to be sitting here in the dojo. It's warm. Turned the heaters on a couple of 3 hours ago. What if we knew that our life, just as it is, and everything that surrounds us and that occurs, so to speak, to us, if you will, it's exactly that, our lives. You know, of course, you've heard this before. I think our lives would be very different if we would give 5 minutes a day, or maybe even the amount of time that we practice meditation, not to think about it, but to what? To sit with it. To try to see it. And this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Like John Tarrant, I remember, for a month or so, maybe just a few weeks, I don't remember. He would have this saying, "Thank you very much. I have no complaints whatsoever." Well, you know, no matter what. Which is the same thing as like, I mean, who am I complaining to? And what am I complaining about? Being alive. And, you know, that's not an uncommon thing to complain about life, about my life, about your life. But it's always, I think, I can't say, of course, for all of us. But I think when I complain about my life, it's either complete habit. It's like I used to use the term for myself, you know, whatever complainings I would do. And then I said, well, of course, or judgments that I would have. And then I would say, well, of course, I couldn't take none of this to court. Meaning that this have absolutely no basis. It's just my whim. It's just my I hope that that you can follow what I'm saying, because of course it's a very difficult thing to really grok completely. And I don't think that we need to. But I think that it'd be good if every day we would remember and we would somehow touch that place in our bodies, sitting, if we practice sitting meditation, which probably we all do. Just as a reminder. And that reminder, of course, often implies the being at that moment. It's not a reminder to start maybe looking at things differently, but it's a reminder to find myself being that. If I practice a little bit like that, you know? Yeah. And as Ken MacLeod says, then just rest. And of course, that doesn't mean, it just means what I'm saying. A little exercise, a little period of practice. I came and sat here half an hour before, and that was my intention. I mean, as I say, this is nothing new that you haven't heard before, but you know, somehow, sometimes things hit us, and you've heard it before, but never the way it hits you sometimes. Not as a brand new thing, but as the depth. It's stronger. I picked up the last Buddha Dharma, which I had read before, I mean, since it came out. And I know some of you have mentioned an article that Joan Sutherland wrote. It's called Everything is Enlightenment. Joan Sutherland, I think, I don't know. If not, Joan Sutherland is a Zen teacher, an heir of John Tarrant, like me. And I know her well. I haven't seen her in many years. She's a brilliant writer. And yeah, and this article is quite beautiful. She has that capacity to write very well. And often very beautiful. I'd like to share some of this. You know, in Zen, we practice this Zazen of ours. We, in Mahayana, our archetype, our hero is the Bodhisattva. And we call this the Bodhisattva path. Bodhisattva is a being, is an enlightened being a person on the road to awakening or enlightenment, with bodhicitta, with an impulse in one's being to wake up, because we see the Four Noble Truths, and we want to be free. As we do this, sometimes I want to be free, Daniel Terragno, and I think there's nothing wrong with that, that's what many of us start. Maybe somebody starts with a complete bodhisattva attitude. They really want to save all beings. But what is peculiarly important, I don't know if it's peculiar, but what is really important in this path of ours is that it comes directly from our own experience. When the Buddha woke up, he had in mind maybe not teaching, because he thought that it would be it's practically impossible to give this away. And yet, as he kept on pondering about this, I'd like to think that he found himself, how could it not be? Plus, I think that I've read various stories in which, and I think maybe Joan mentions it here, or maybe it's something else I read in the last 2 days, that he sat there until some of his old buddies came and told him that they wanted to be taught whatever he had found out, and that then he stood up. I had never heard that. I've always heard that he went looking for them, and he found them in Deer Park or around there. That's where he gave his first sermon to these 5 beings. So I was saying, when I came to a spiritual practice, it was mostly out of self-concern, if not concern, an idea of wanting to improve myself and wanting to be less bound by my circumstances. And I did that for a while, quite a few years, but it was had everything to do with me. Sure, I work with people, they're very other practitioner. This was in the Gurdjieff work. And the idea of waking up was also exactly the same. But the idea of us being nincompoops, or even worse than nincompoops, was very much present, and after a while, when I decided that I wanted to start practicing meditation, and I found out that we're no nincompoops, we're human beings, and human beings have various characteristics that are absolutely fantastic and are also very complicated and very easy to get self-absorbed, because we have that reflection, self-reflection, that it's naturally part of our consciousness. And we look outside and we see it separate from us, and so on and so forth. So as we practice meditation and Zen and Buddhism, and we read what we read, and we hear about Bodhisattva, and we start experiencing our own suffering, our own discomfort, our own dissatisfaction, and finding out that we're not alone. This is it's total humanness, nothing but being human. So imagine the Buddha having that great awakening. And this is the month that we celebrate. I mean, some people are already in Rohatsu. And discovering what he had always been looking for. What is this suffering? And why? What is it that causes it? And he discovers this amazing path. And it was different than everything that was happening with the spiritual movements in India, in South Asia at this time. Although, as you probably, most of you have heard, that the Indian people consider Buddhism part of Hinduism. And Gautama Buddha, they respect him and stuff, but he's just an avatar of Vishnu. For many, many years, it was like that, you know, and then well, in the 19th century, it started getting to be more a thing, that it was definitely separate. So what I'm saying is that as we start practicing and we start investigating this great matter of being alive and knowing that we're going to die and our own characteristics, you know, our own particularities, our own character, our own psychological development and stuff. That can be quite heavy. And of course, most of us, for a while, that's what we believe that we actually are. We actually are all these things that we think and judge and feel and blah, 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 blah. And that's it. And that's it. Zazen has the capacity, I think, just by what Zazen is, has the capacity to quiet us up and allow the equipaje, you know, the luggage that we carry about ourselves, backpacks and carts, to settle down a bit. Sometimes I like to think that I feel that they become lighter and maybe even more transparent. So they're not as heavy. And I can just be a human being sitting in my cushion here. So that's definitely part of the path. And we have moments of insight. We have moments on which, you know, to use one of Dogen's sayings, you know, it seems like the body drops away. that this idea that I maybe start having, that maybe I'm not who I think I am, and maybe things are not what I think they are, starts getting clearer. And we do have, as I was saying, certain insights about the nature of reality, that there seems to be something out there, and people talk about it, and books are written, and they call it awakening, they call it opening up, they call it enlightenment, the variety of, yeah. So we take this path, and as we do this, I think the self-centeredness doesn't go away completely, but it starts to make sense. If I have the experience of being lighter, being a completely ordinary human being with all the problems that pretty much people have as being humans, and somehow experience and taste some freedom in the midst of that, or if not in the midst, that at some point that background, that running commentary of what my life is, I find myself in this place. It's vast, it's generous, it's just this body sitting, breathing. In the morning, maybe listening to the birds. The rain is falling, we listen to the rain, etc. Or the cars going by. So the load gets lighter, and of course gets heavy again. So naturally, I think that the idea that's been written for 2,500 years, 2,500 years, 2,300 years maybe, the Mahayana started. I like to see it that started developing naturally. Not that it was a bunch of philosophers saying something, anyway, who knows? Yeah. And this impulse and this vows that we take, an impulse of like, yeah, I've seen something and it helps me. It helps me take my life a little bit differently. Of course, I want to share that. And the Bodhisattva vow, it's not just this completely idealistic thing. Not that it's something that, of course, either. Of course not. But we understand that it's something that we can do in our life as we move around in our life as regular human beings. And it would come. It starts to come a little bit more natural until we're absorbed, self-absorbed with fear or whatever, self-centeredness. And sometimes it's definitely not foreign to us. It's definitely not foreign to me. It's definitely part of being human. So, as Joan's article here, it's called, and it's long, huh? Everything is Enlightenment. Interesting title, you know. And I don't want to say too much about it. You can read it. It's really worthwhile. And that is not much different than what I started saying when I opened my mouth this evening. What if this life of each of us, the Buddha discovered that we have this nature, whether we are awakened to it or not. It's part of our life. It's part of our humanness. That's why being a human being in Buddhism is treated as a gift, as a very special gift. We have the possibility to wake up as opposed to the rest of the beings of the six worlds. So Joan, in her way, tells stories and talks about this awakening and enlightenment. And at some point she says, and so we enter a phase of awakening that includes, perhaps surprisingly, endarkenment, as well as enlightenment, as well as enlightenment. Awakening is a marriage of wisdom and compassion, and both wisdom and compassion are made up of enlightening and endarkening. The enlightening aspect of wisdom is growing clarity of insight that puts doubts to rest and creates confidence. It's about what we come to understand. The endarkening aspect of wisdom is our profound acceptance of the great mystery at the heart of things, which we can never understand in ordinary ways, but we can come to rest in. This is about knowing that we can't know, and it's sometimes called the not knowing mind. The enlightening aspect of compassion includes our shining commitment to everyone's freedom from suffering. The endarkening aspect of compassion is our willingness to have our hearts broken by the world, so our hearts remain open and not defensive. As we endarken, we see that we're not only continuous with the luminous nature of the universe, but also continuous with the great broken heart of the world. And we and the world share a tenderness that is both poignant beauty and a wound. Trungpa talks about this often, you know, the tenderness of that in a being, you know, a wound, the tenderness of a wound. Joan talks a little bit later at the Vimalakirti Sutra, no? And Manjushri, one of the bodhisattvas that dares go to visit Vimalakirti. The Buddha asks all these bodhisattvas to go visit Vimalakirti because he's sick. But everybody doesn't quite want to do it because last time they were in his presence, they felt like nincompoops. And Manjushri eventually goes. And one of the things that happen is like Vimalakirti is in his room and he says, you're sick. Why are you sick, Vimalakirti? Oh. And he says, I'm sick because the whole world is sick. As you can see, the Bodhisattva vow is right there. And there's a dialogue, and I don't have it with me, and I think it's enough for me to say that. What she calls in darkening. January 5th, 2021, will be 95, 2005, 2015. Yeah. It will be 35 years. Wow. 35 years that I had heart surgery, double bypass. And something was going on in my life then. I mean, I was quite healthy, other than this. Strong. My body was in great shape, I thought. I was skiing better than ever. I had stopped drinking for quite a few years. Using drugs. And I was, I was practicing Zen, and I was, I was Jisha, I was Tanto, and often I would give, talks in the dojo while walking the stick. And somebody remind me after the surgery, that I had been talking a lot during sesshin about the broken heart. And then, of course, exactly that literally what ended up happening. But I remember saying, in fact, in the dojo, that something like what is the heart for is if not to get broken, something like that, So I think that whenever we find ourselves in our lives, we can understand a little bit that metaphor of the broken heart and the way that Joan talks about here. The undarkening aspect of compassion is a willingness to have our hearts broken by the world, so hearts remain open and not defensive. As we undarken, we see that we're not only continuous with the luminous nature of the universe, but also continuous with the great broken heart of the world. Yeah. I remember a month after surgery, I did sesshin, 7-day sesshin, St. Dorothy's. I did the whole thing. I would go to bed though in the last block, but I'd get up at 4:30 or something. I think in those days we might have been getting up at 4, I don't remember. Then we started getting up at 5. And it was very interesting, and some people told me, but I caught myself doing that a lot of the time. Instead of sitting in the mudra, the Zazen mudra, my right hand was in my chest, you know. Anyway, just that metaphor of the heart was a big deal at that time for me. And something was happening in my life that was kind of heartbreaking. So, well, let me tell you something else. One day I'm in a house of a friend of mine in Santa Rosa, that he was going to Tibet and Nepal. He used to lead treks there. And he said, you know, Daniel, when, you know, you're not going to go to Occidental all the way out there by yourself, you know. Stay in my house in Santa Rosa, and you're going to need help, you know, for a few weeks anyway. So I stayed in his house. And one night, in January, late night, we had one of those nice big storms that we used to have all the time, and pretty heavy rain and wind. And there was a tree outside that one branch broke and fell, and the wind was hitting the rain was hitting some of the. I was in the living room in a hospital bed, and I probably was not by myself. Somebody was staying in the house, because that's the way it was. But I felt this incredible calmness, you know, and I thought, oh, I'm dying. And I had read that when people are dying at some point, or when people are sick and sometimes they feel good, it's like because they're going to die. And it was, I had this really interesting experience that I told John about the next day. The wind was slapping things, you know, the rain was falling, and the branch breaks. And it's like, why not? You know, it was the same thing happened to this body, you know. It broke, the heart broke. Why not? I'm a human being and things break, you know, something like that, you know. But it was really, really very, very profound kind of experience. When I talked to John, he says, Daniel, could you please write something about this? I said, John, I have such a hard time writing, and in the place that I am, in the space, I don't think so that I can do much. I says, oh, don't worry about it. I'll send. And Noelle came over, and we spent one afternoon, and she was like a medium in a way, you know. She took notes, and she wrote this amazing article as if it was me. I mean, it says in the article that this was Danielle conversing with her. And it's in Blind Donkey. I don't know if any of you are interested, I can show it to you. And what was extraordinary was, like, I mean, I would read it and it was me 100%, you know. This was exactly me. I mean, the way that I expressed myself. And the name of the article was "Everybody Should Have Open Heart Surgery at least once in their life," something like that. Anyway. why am I saying all of just, just to, I didn't know I was going to talk about this. Just the idea of the heartbroken, which it's not an idea that's far away from me, and yet I so let me finish by reading a little bit more of Joni's place thing here. It is as though after she says, as we endarkened, we see that we're not only continuous with the luminous nature of the universe, but also continuous with the great broken heart of the world. We and the world share a tenderness that is both poignant, beauty, and wound. It's as though revelation happens at the speed of electrical impulses in the brain, while embodiment happens at the speed of the heart, which is a slow beating muscle. The sutra that Vimalakirti speaks contains a long dialogue between Manjushri, the Bodhisattva's wisdom, and Vimalakirti, a great awakened householder. In some ways, Manjushri speaks from the mind and Vimalakirti from the heart. Vimalakirti is ill, and he says that he's sick because the whole world is sick. The Chinese term for duality, for non-duality, is not two. And Vimalakirti rests on his couch in deep not two-ness with the world, Manjushri wielding his sword of insight and clarity, asks Vimalakirti how the illness can be extinguished. From Manjushri's perspective, this is a problem to be fixed as quickly as possible. Vimalakirti responds with a long and detailed talk on how the human heart can be healed with time. His is a perspective from deep within embodied life, valuing its greatest challenge as exactly what the Bodhisattva needs to give birth to herself. This is, of course, so much what this practice is, it's that posture of inquiry. Inquiry sounds a little bit too heady, but that's just my problem. of the question, of questioning. What is it? This curiosity, this little bit of curiosity and discomfort, disquietude. What is this? Without that, we really can't do much. And really, I think that's all we really need. We really need, if we take a look at what the way our practice goes and how we come here and how we practice, and it's really comes from this question. And the answer, we find it. We find it because it's always present. So we really don't need to be told many answers. What we really need to do is look, feel, and do our life, And of course, for us, the practice of Zazen is the practice of coming home, isn't it? So, thank you much. I wasn't sure what I was I knew I wanted to read a little bit of this quote here from Joan. But then it's always a treat when you're as undisciplined as far as the only way that I can give a talk is just with a few sketches and then let her rip. So thank you for listening. And please, if there's any comments or questions, welcome. And is there somebody there that I should welcome that I don't know?
Yes, it's Sarah McClellan. She's a friend of Kyoko and Nettie.
Oh, welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right. How you all doing?
I put a link to Joan's article in the chat function.
All right.
Also a quick quote from Tina Turner, "Who needs a heart when a heart can be broken," from that wonderful song, "What's Love Got to Do with It?" I like that Joan in her article uses the word revelation because it
Yeah, she used it a lot. I was
yeah,
surprised.
she basically is using it as a substitute for Kinsho. And I think it's very fascinating because it's part of what I think is going to have to be the acclimation and appropriation of certain terms for Buddhism in the West. So
Yeah, I was.
who knows whether it'll stick or not, but I like the idea of pushing the envelope and trying it out.
Yeah, you know, we can be so picky here, and if it reminds us too much about what we don't like,
Yeah,
we put so much resistance, you know.
right.
Oh, it reminds me of such. Oh, it reminds me of Catholic Church or whatever.
Right. But it really just means disclosure, the
Yeah.
revelation that the lid is taken off and it's revealed. And I mean, isn't that the feeling that we get when we have these little peeps, the glimpses of insight?
Yeah, Rumi's open secret.
Whoa, revelation. I never heard her use that term. Very seldom I hear people talk about it, unless within the Christian
Right.
tradition, you know. It's good.
I was really touched by the balance between enlightening and darkening. There's something that was very challengingly engaging about that. I think because a lot of my work life and my daily life is sitting with profound human suffering, I've had this phrase that I've lived with for a few years, which is, how can you be of use to anybody if you can't let your heart break? And I think that there's something about that vibrant not two-ness of darkening and lightening that really was transformative for me tonight. I think I'll be opening in that for a while. It was really lovely.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
When I was studying psychology in the early 70s, the wounded healer was the phrase that everybody was using.
Right.
Sarah, were you going to say something? I saw you unmuted yourself.
No, I was just saying thank you. I'll view it again. I have nothing to say right now. Thank you, though.
I had this poem that I wrote at the beginning of practice that went, you keep begging every day to be not enough, asking to be broken, your broken heart gushing and breaking, gushing and breaking, gushing and breaking. Don't you know that your broken heart is the only ship home? And that's been kind of playing out in my mind as we were hanging out here tonight, just that, you know, that those balances.
Since you mentioned not to, I wanted to point out that that's what this says here in the kanji, not to.
Wait, which where? Oh, I see.
Not 2.
Okay.
This is Nonan's calligraphy, not 2, and then it has the Enso.
I'll say one thing that I just thought of, that despite the endarkening and the enlightening and everything that's happening, that, you know, I read an article that Kokyo wrote about grasping, and he used an analogy about how Buddha nature is like the sunshine, and that it's always there. The sun is always shining, but sometimes it's obscured by the clouds. But we do have like a faith that the sun's shining right there all the time. And so when there's pain, when things happen, and that kind of like self-centeredness arises, that we can always remember that the sun is shining, and we can just let that go and return to that peace and that calm and that ease.
Did you, Sarah, did you use the word grafting at first?
No.
Oh, I thought you said something about Kokyo has the metaphor on grafting.
Grasping.
Oh, grasping, I see.
Oh, grasping. There's an article on his I forget what it's called, the 4 ways. It's about the 4 ways of grasping.
Okay.
And I was talking about that with a friend in terms of suffering, and why grasping leads us to suffering.
Thank you.
Today, a little bit, had a chance in talking with Danielle a little bit today about the things in my life that have been the most heartbreaking. Just kind of mentioned them in passing, and talking about the broken heart, breaking heart. You and Joan caused me, excuse me, caused me to reflect again what occasionally I remember, which is there's nothing wrong with a broken heart. And there's nothing wrong with me because my heart has been broken. And a lot of my spiritual path for several decades has been trying to get over a broken heart. Trying to get over it. And I never did. You know, I never did get over a broken heart. And I found myself still at it this afternoon talking to you, Danielle, about my daughter and how I needed to reconcile myself. And it was another way of getting over it. And,
That was very nice having tea with you today at your place.
it was nice. It was nice. And it reminds me of if I can just sit with that, you know, reminds me to do that as I've sat with other things. Just to sit with that and let that be, and be this human being.
Right.
This human being, and feel the richness of the fact that I feel the richness of the feeling of being human. Yeah, feel it.
I've been, you know, I talk to a lot of people now during the week, and I've been talking often to people how about the vocabulary that we use when we talk about ourselves, or we talk about ourselves to ourselves, or in our own mind, you know. And as you were talking, you know, I thought, yeah, you know, I mean, of course I know what you mean. And of course I understand a broken heart, you know. And at the same time, that, you know, I mean, that laughter that came out from you,
Yeah.
when the tree breaks, and the tree breaks, what, you know, what's wrong with that? I mean, there's a storm. It's like natural. And, you know, and this body had this thing, and the heart went boom, boom, you know? And it was, that was the sense, you know, and just very, very spacious and acceptance and love, you know, love for just everything. You know. So that's, I think that, you know, sometimes I wonder if there can ever be experience that kind of love. And I am sure we've all experienced it at various times. But I, you know, again, to bring a personal example, but I tend to do that a lot, but it feels that it's the only way that I can really talk about certain things. When my father died and I was here, I had seen him 2 months before. So I didn't, and it was expensive to go and this and that, so I didn't go. But I had a couple of 2 or 3 days with such sadness in the heart, but also such joy and love, you know. It was just really, really, really beautiful. I had never experienced that. I remember John was in Australia and I went and picked him up at the airport, and you know, I hadn't talked to him since my father had died. Well, I'd never talked to him when he was in Australia unless he sent me some message or something. But so he asked me, how am I doing? I says, fine, this and that. And then he says, you know, my father died. And I says, oh, you know, I'm sorry, tell me something about it. And so we're driving and I tell him that story, you know, and, you know, he just encouraged me, you know, I was still a fairly new student, you know, how that, that tenderness, you know, or that actual, the wounding of the heart, it can be so also enlivening. I guess I felt so grateful for my dad that it was, I could also feel that joy. And then I would be driving and I'd be thinking of him and just weeping in a very, just tears, you know, not weeping, you know, just tears. And I had never experienced those two things together, sadness and joy and gratitude. Joy, driving, seeing the greenery in Sonoma County and going to Santa Rosa through Occidental and Sebastopol. Yeah. So this, you know, we've grown up sometimes putting those two things, such separateness and such separate things. Oh, that's a bummer. Oh, how depressing. How can you talk about that? Mm-hmm. And so Joan using the term endarkening. That is good. And to find out that how that experience, but even sadness, you know, just profound sadness, how enlivening it is. I mean, how tender it is. I mean by that, how sometimes people can mistake it with depression, you know, sadness and depression. Depression, I think that I'm a little bit dead in depression, you know, I'm flat. And with sadness, I'm bubbling. You know, bubbling. I mean, it sounds goofy, not bubbling, but just tender, moist. And the soul, the psyche, loves wetness. That's a translation of one of Heraclitus' sayings. I like that. Okay, well, we're going to start our Zoom retreat, Rohatsu, tomorrow. I'm sure I'll be seeing you, some of you. And with Ohio and some people from St. Louis and, you know, Indiana. We're not going to be, we're going to be like 20, 25 people. So that'd be a nice number. Anything else? All right. Sarah, do you live in Sonoma County or you're from Santa Cruz or something?
I live in Santa Cruz, and
Oh.
I'm part of the Santa Cruz Zen Center.
Right, yeah.
Yes,
All right. Well, say hello to Nettie.
I will.
We love Nettie and Kokyo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of my first meditation homes, was that Santa Cruz Zen Center. I learned a lot there. I was very grateful for it.
Mm. And Kokyo is in Colorado with Shoho, but I'll see Nettie soon and I'll say hello.
All right, yes.
Mhm.
Okay,
Very Rohatsu.
thank you.